One person? So let's bring in two men that did this job about what you have to be careful about, what it says about the operation in full, and what this means as a piece of solving the immigration problem. John Sandvik, former acting director of ICE, in the Obama administration, and Victor Avila, retired supervisory special agent for ICE. Although, tell me if I'm wrong. First of all, fellas, thank you very much, especially on a Friday night. Appreciate you. Do I have this wrong, John? Because I was chasing this down, and I only have the one veteran from Puerto Rico that they took and messed with his ID, didn't believe his ID, but not that multiple people were swept up who wound up being citizens and shouldn't have been swept up. What do you think the reality of the concern is?
Chris, look, I think the early reporting is always sketchy on these kind of incidents. And so you need to be careful rushing to judgment when you just get that early reporting. Even at the department, I can't tell you how many times we're involved in major incidents where the early reports came in and they were just flat wrong. At the end of the day, I think what happened here was a temporary detention where, and Mr. Avila can explain this as well. When agents come in for officer safety reasons, they need to temporarily detain people, make sure they're not a threat to the officers, determine their identity, and then go forward with the investigation from there. So I think all of this was probably blown a little bit out of proportion.
Mr. Avila, there is another suggestion. That is, you're going into churches, you're going into schools, you're going to be grabbing kids, you're going to be grabbing old women. What is the reality about why you need access to these sensitive venues and what the reality is?
The reality, Chris, and thanks again for having me back, is it's not the location per se that you mentioned that are going to be targeted. It's the individuals that are targeted that sometimes go into these locations. And I could tell you firsthand, under the Obama administration, I was ordered to stand down one time to take down a drug trafficker who was also an illegal alien right before I got him out of a classroom at an education establishment, at a school. I was literally outside, and they said, "Don't you do it," because President Obama at that time had already started this policy of not going and targeting or arresting illegals in churches, schools, and courthouses and such like that. That's the big difference here, is that those restrictions are gone. And if you're targeting someone and you're looking for someone that runs into a church to seek refuge, that's no longer gonna work. It's not going to be valid. And I agree with the assessment of when these ICE agents and HSI special agents go out to these scenes, they're going to be questioning a lot of people. That doesn't mean that they're in custody for immigration purposes. I mean, if you're a U.S. citizen, you have nothing to worry about. And if they're asking you for whatever reason, and remember, there's illegal aliens from all over the world here. Whether they look Hispanic, Black, Asian, they're from all over the world. So there's a lot to go through here. And I think that initially, as they're going through the targeting, yes, ICE agents are going to encounter other people that are going to be around the target that possibly are also undocumented. And that's already actually been happening, that they got to make sure they take into custody as well.
So John, here's my concern. I want the real bad guys. I want the gangbangers. I want the traffickers. I want the fentanyl mules and the guys who are moving them. They're not really showing up to 9-to-5 jobs, and you're probably not going to find them in school. So are these operations something that can get those guys?
Well, first, to be clear, I don't anticipate that, even though the sensitive locations policy was lifted, that ICE will be doing a lot of operations at schools for the very reason you just said, Chris. You're not going to find those high-value targets in those locations, and one would hope that ICE's willingness to go to schools will be very limited. But you're right. As we go forward with this mass deportation, we've built this infrastructure to deport more people than we've ever seen before, and drawing on the resources of DOD. The temptation is going to be, or the hard part is going to be, how do we find those high value targets? And instead of just grabbing the low hanging fruit, worksite operations like this today can be a very valuable tool for getting a lot of undocumented immigrants because they're centrally located, they're all together, and so you can send in a team of officers and make a large number of arrests at once. You can get a lot more arrests that way than the more tedious work of kind of doing gang work where you have to get leads and get informants because they don't show up at a job. So I do think that, operationally, it's going to be very important to watch and see how this goes forward. And if we're continuing to engage in tactics that are less likely to get those dangerous criminals, or if we're going to do that more tedious work of getting the bad guys off the street.
I think you got to do both. John, Victor, thank you both very much. As we learn more, I'll bring you up. Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.